and if it fails, the cockpit becomes a coffin. Is that a chance you're going to take?
This is our decision. If the answer lies beyond death, then that's where we go. Just wait and see. My brightest stars will pierce the sky for all to see.
Nearly for as long as Lucilla has been a character, the community has been picking apart all the different movie references that she talks about. However, with the release of her story in the 3.4 Segue quest, we've got to see more of the backstory of the enigmatic president of Star Torch Academy, as well as some particularly interesting references besides just movies. As always, on this channel, I look to focus on the symbolic references of the characters of Wuthering Waves, and in the case of Lucilla, there admittedly aren't as much, meaning this will be a bit of a shorter video. However, that of course doesn't mean that her references lack depth in any capacity. So as always, this video will contain spoilers for the 3.4 Segue story. If you're all good with that, then let's get started. While Lucilla's name doesn't seem to have anything special to do with it, considering her original Chinese name seems to be a transliteration rather than having any intrinsic meaning, I did find it interesting that Lucilla's name shares many similarities and even has the same pronunciation as another name, Lucia. Being the female version of Lucius, it is quite a famous name, stemming from Latin and being a recognized first name or praenomen that was given to a child during the Dies Lustricus, which is a kind of classical equivalent of a baptism. Lucius and Lucia both mean the same thing, being derived from the Latin word lux, meaning light. While that is rather generic of course, I think that Lucilla being characterized as a light is rather fitting. As the principal of Star Torch, we saw quite a lot throughout her story that a guiding light is a role that she takes on quite seriously. As she says, her dream is to see other people's dreams come true. With the focus of the 3.4 Segue being to shut down a rebel college and dust the dreams of her students, this connotation of her being a beacon amidst the darkness, a motif that has been used an awful lot in Wuthering Waves, becomes incredibly apparent. Light is used everywhere in Lucilla's story and design. Cameras, films, visions all depend on light. One of the biggest symbolic references of her story, the legend of Icarus, which we'll talk about next chapter, is centered around the pursuit of not only just the sky, but reaching towards the light. When you even recall back to the original motto of Star Torch Academy that we first saw at the beginning of 3.0, it declared that it was an institution that strove for the stars, strove for the light, carrying the torch of humanity forward with imagery of not only Icarus, but also Prometheus. Even the name of Lahiroi itself, connoting a salvation that comes from the heavens, is paralleled as the Exostrider provided the one thing the people needed, light amidst darkness. And now that we are at the very end of the Lahiroi saga, we can see what Lucilla represents as a centerpiece of all of this, light and hope. The legend of Icarus is perhaps one of the most famous stories of classicism and all of Western canon. It tells the story of Icarus and Daedalus, who escape a labyrinth in Crete by crafting wings out of feathers and beeswax. Daedalus warns his son Icarus to not fly too high, lest the heat of the sun melt the wax and send him plummeting to earth. Despite the warnings, Icarus, who was in awe of the beauty of the light, flew higher and higher until his wings melted and he was doomed to fall. This legend, since ancient times, has been used over and over as both a warning against overambition and conversely also a message of noble ambition. It would probably not surprise you at all that Icarus' story has been also referenced in Wuthering Waves. In Chacona's story, she directly compares herself to Icarus, with her story and that of the Golden Anthem being akin to burning and sacrificing one's life in pursuit of the truth, being further reinforced by Cristoforo's infamous doomed bird metaphor. However, while many stories since love talking about Icarus' demise, very few take on the perspective of Daedalus, Icarus' father who crafted his wings, indirectly dooming him to death. One of the central points of Lucilla's backstory is her role in approving her students' plans in their wild ambitions, which indirectly led to many of their deaths. Lucilla describes how her students strove to touch the sky, and we, through her memories, watch from below as their spacecraft explode before reaching it. From this, it's clear that Lucilla's anecdote is a reference to the legend of Icarus, though Lucilla is not Icarus himself. Her guilt and the eventual conquering of it as she pushes Rebel College onwards makes her a spectator, the one responsible for allowing Icarus to fly. Unlike Chacona, who sees herself as Icarus in a story, Lucilla is Daedalus, the one who approved her students' plans and gave them the wings to fly towards the sun. Her immense guilt in acting as an enabler mirrors that of a parental figure, of a principal who is responsible for the fates of all of her students. Even in her final pitch to the Academy Committee, she takes responsibility for their deaths and failures as she tries to save the Rebel College program, acknowledging them as sacrifices that pave the road for humanity's future. As we said in the previous chapter, Lahairoi in the Academy was a place of light that carries the torch forward for humanity. Now at the end of the Lahairoi saga, we finally know what the logo represented. It was the ambition of Icarus, reaching forward for a seemingly impossible sky. Lucilla's forte, which plays a big role in not just her combat but also her story, is one that allows 2D visions like memories and photographs to be transposed into a 3D space, making for very fascinating reality-breaking visuals that we saw in her story. As she says herself, her forte is called the Memory Palace, which is actually a reference to the Mind Palace, a mental technique that is oftentimes called the Method of Loci. In simple terms, it is basically a memorization and organization tool that focuses on recording information in a familiar three-dimensional space rather than the usual two-dimensional way. Let's say, hypothetically, that you need to remember the periodic table for a science test. While one method is the more two-dimensional method of rote memorization, where you memorize all the symbols and other information, using the Method of Loci would involve transposing that into a 3D space, such as memorizing the periodic table as a 3D object with the information stored as, let's say, a museum exhibition for some kind of informational display. This is because the human brain is more adapted to remember three-dimensional spaces better, recalling spatial memory stronger than rote memory in, for example, flat numbers and text. This is actually pretty well shown in Lucilla's forte, as the first time she shows us her powers, we get to actually see the Method of Loci in action. While Lucilla does have the weakness of a limited memory, she can transpose her memories into three-dimensional spaces, crafting entranceways out of nothing, and creating objects solely from her memories. This becomes even a critical gameplay mechanic within not only her story but her overall gameplay, as she is able to use a device like cameras to literally transpose a still scene into the three-dimensional world, as well as also collect resources from a seemingly infinite distance away. Her forte is essentially a play on the Mind Palace, or Method of Loci, in being able to not only memorize flat memories as 3D stimuli, but also being able to place that into the real world. As she says herself, Lucilla believes that life is not a photograph, life is flesh, life is blood, Life must not be survived, but lived. Amongst all the movies that Lucilla references, there is one that I find more interesting than the rest, one that pertains to a character much more than the others. Although Lucilla references a lot of movies, from The Matrix to The Truman Show, there was one film, referenced even before her story within the Whispers Between the Stars event, one that she even quotes directly, that functions as a kind of analogy of her life and troubles. This is the metafictive Italian film 8½, a movie from 1963 that follows the problems of a filmmaker suffering from creative block amidst other problems in his life. Guido, the film director main character, revolves the film around, well, making the perfect film, as he juggles his life and relationships with other people. It's a bit of a complicated movie, so I won't try to bore you too much with the analysis and intricacies of it, but one thing you can probably see already that is quite interesting is that both Guido and Lucilla are people that manage others, a director and a principal. They both manage projects that are falling apart, the Rebel College program, or a film that can't get off the ground. However, both of these projects are only metaphors for their grander lives. Both Guido and Lucilla are somewhat lost, unsure of how to go forward. When Guido confesses that, for example, that he wants to make an honest film but can't find anything honest to say, he really means that he can't fully understand and live his own life honestly, just like how Lucilla struggles to confront her past and role as principal. However, beyond this, the main message of 8½, is something else entirely. While Guido spends nearly the entire film trying desperately to create a film, he is confronted with the reality that instead of forcing himself to push out something he's not happy with, it is better to start fresh, entirely from nothing, in order to be truly honest to himself. Lucilla, in a Whispers Between the Stars entry, really quotes from the most illuminating parts of this message, when Guido seeks out a critic to try and give him advice. We, and I say we because I consider you as such, must remain lucid to the bitter end. This is the full transcript of that quote. It's quite a bit of word soup, but to summarize, the critic is telling Guido that sometimes, instead of forcing himself to try to create a perfect film, he should try to instead start over, to salt the earth, metaphorically, start from a clean slate. Lucilla, as someone who has to do that quite literally, reinventing Rebel College from the ground up, is someone that takes this quote to heart within her life as well. As he resonated with limited memories, no longer even remembering her own childhood, she must constantly reinvent not only her life, but also her own existence. In addition to this, one of the interesting features of 8½, is that not only is it metafictive, but it is also a patchwork film. It's comprised of flashbacks, random memories, even Guido's imagination at times. Lucilla, as someone who can play her memories like they are a film, and whose memories are strewn all over her memory palace, is also similar in this regard. And with that, we're finished with Lucilla. This is quite a short one, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. I'll be working on a slightly bigger project, so I'll be busy in the meantime, but if you liked this video, consider subscribing, becoming a channel member, or discussing this in the comments. As always, I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you all in the next video.